Hey, welcome back to another episode of Web3 with Whitney. This is technically the 31st episode, but I decided because I've crossed the 30 episode mark and because it's been a few days since I've recorded an episode that I would kind of start fresh and stop naming it by day. So today's episode is just one word. Well, depending on where you see it, it might say Web3 with Whitney dash this word. I'm not going to say what the word is just in case you didn't even look at the title, because maybe this will be like a little surprise, because this topic is exciting. I'm really excited to tell you about this. And I'm also glad that I waited a few days because I wanted to better understand what I'm going to talk about today, even though I'm still at the very beginning stages, just like a lot of the things I'm doing in Web3. I also wanted to take some time off from going live, especially because I felt like it was important to do minimal social media content that doesn't have to do with what's going on in the Ukraine. I feel like in times like this, it's really important for us to put our focus into that, especially publicly. I just didn't feel comfortable talking about what is ultimately on the, well, I was going to say frivolous side. I definitely don't think that Web3 is frivolous. Today's topic may feel a little on the frivolous side in the grand scheme of things, although maybe in a way it ties into it. It'll make more sense once I start talking about it. And, I've noticed that a lot of people in the Web3 space are actually trying to do some good. Well, for this specific situation with what's going on in the Ukraine, meaning I think in general, there's a lot of good in Web3, but some inspiring things were raising money through cryptocurrency. And one project I saw raised, I think, over $1 million, or exactly $1 million in 30 seconds, which sounds a little nuts. Granted, there was a lot of work that went into it, but a couple people, I believe, came together to create a project to raise money quickly. And I might have been an NFT project. I actually didn't bother getting any of the details because I felt a bit overwhelmed. That was another one of the big reasons I stepped back from the show a little bit more than I have in the past month. I think that once crises are happening, whether directly to us or indirectly in the world, they can feel really intense emotionally. And since well-being is at the core of all of my work, I think it's important to lead by example, which for me is stepping back and pausing a lot of the work that I'm doing, or at least in the context of or relative to what's going on. And just encouraging you to do the same, to really take care of yourself, because it's like that common saying of you got to put the oxygen mask on first before you help someone else put on theirs. And if we don't take care of ourselves, especially our emotional well-being, our mental health, it makes it really hard for us to take action. For me, it's overwhelm. I have felt frustrated because I want to spend more time learning about what's going on in the Ukraine. But I haven't had a lot of the mental energy and space due to a lot of work projects. So it sometimes takes time for us to put things aside unless we're in a position where we can put everything on hold to focus on it. And I think it's amazing that some people have been able to do that. So anyways, I didn't feel like adding more work on my plate was a good choice right now. And that is something worth considering for yourself too, if you haven't yet. And if you have any tips and resources that you want to share, I've been trying to read up on it as best I can. If you have accounts, if you have projects, I would love to hear it all. So you can send me a message, you can leave a comment on the video if it allows for it, or post and tag me and I'll share it if it's appropriate. I would love to know what you've been learning about what's been going on. And if it intersects with Web3, that's great too. Maybe there's a way that we can highlight more projects that are going on and using cryptocurrency and NFTs and the metaverse for good. Speaking of the metaverse, that is one of the big themes in today's episode, because I'm excited to share that I got a hold of an Oculus and I did not buy it. I actually was lent it from a friend. I posted on Twitter that I was considering buying an Oculus Quest 2 and did like a little poll, like, should I get the Oculus, yes or no? And my friend saw that and sent me a text and said, hey, I'm not using my Oculus very much. Do you want to borrow it for a little bit to determine if you want to get one or not? And I was like, yes. So I got it a few days ago and I've been using it a ton, especially yesterday. It was over the weekend. I'm recording this on Sunday. So yesterday was Saturday and I spent a lot of time with the Oculus. I want to lead you through step by step how it went. I think that it's amazing. Let me just say it that way. It's better than I thought it was going to be. I have not done much in the metaverse space yet with the Oculus. I've kind of like skimmed the surface of it. What I have been doing is more checking out the virtual reality side of the Oculus, getting a feel for how I might want to use it in my life, where I think things are going, how this technology will benefit us. All the pros and cons of it, I'm trying to better understand. So I'm going to lay it all out for you and just share a little bit more. I was thinking about actually sharing some of the visuals, but that is one thing I need to work on. First, I haven't fully figured out how to connect it, if possible, to my live stream. I know there's a way. I see people like on Twitch sharing it on, live streams of their Oculus. May or may not get into that. I've long story short, found a little tutorial and didn't fully figure out how to finish it. It wasn't working as easily as I thought. But I have been able to record some of my Oculus experiences, which are pretty easy. However, the way that I've been recording them, the only option is for me to share them to Facebook, which is pretty annoying. That's actually one of the drawbacks. And I apologize in advance if you hear a dog barking. There's an old dog downstairs that barks from time to time. And I find it distracting. Hopefully it doesn't distract you today because I want to just keep moving forward with this versus pausing to wait for the dog to stop barking. Anyways, so the biggest drawback to me, well, here, let me share the drawbacks because there's less drawbacks. There's less cons than pros. I'm mostly going to share all the positive sides of this. So number one, it hasn't been super easy to just broadcast it, which, not most people are not going to need. To share it, also a thing that most people aren't going to need. There's really cool technology, very easy ways to press record. You can record and save directly into your Oculus, and then you can share it out to Facebook. Facebook/Meta owns the Oculus now. But I don't want to share it to my Facebook account, especially because I want to edit it. I saw on my phone there are ways to trim it, but then the phone had some issues. So long story short, sharing clips, recording your Oculus experience has been not a super quick learning curve for me, at least. The Facebook side of it is also interesting because one thing that's been a bit confusing is all the different logins. So you can connect your Facebook account very easily to an Oculus account and set it all up there. And when you first open it up, I think you had to do that or create some sort of username for yourself in there. One thing I really didn't like about setup was that some of it required me to actually take the Oculus off of my head and go to my computer or my iPhone to do other steps like setting up accounts. You had to confirm your account. I don't know if the Oculus software itself needed that or the apps that you can download. Very similar to a phone, you can download all these different apps on the Oculus in order to have your different experiences. And almost every one of those requires a username. So some of them allow you to create your username and type in a password and maybe connect your email, and then you're good to go and start right away. But a number of them required you do all of that, and then you go to your computer or your phone to confirm it. So if you take off your Oculus, go confirm it, put it back on. Every time you take off the device, it's a little jarring or it kind of changes things. That sort of elements of the Oculus has been kind of annoying because it takes you out of the experience. And I just want to get in it. So the user design of it is annoying. Also, typing in passwords and your email address, you're using these controllers. I don't know what they're called exactly. I'm just going to call them controllers. And they're very easy to use, actually. The hardware of the Oculus is very straightforward, very familiar. It feels like a video game controller or something, but even better, I'm not quite sure what the circular elements of it, maybe those are sensors, but they have these buttons and joysticks inside. They have a couple buttons on the outside. Very easy, these little wristbands. They remind me kind of the Nintendo Switch. And a lot of the Oculus reminds me of the Switch. So if you've ever used that, it felt like a easy pathway. Like if you ever had Nintendo systems growing up, or even Xbox, I'm sure, but I've always been a Nintendo girl, graduating from system to system. And I got the Switch probably 5 years ago. It's awesome. It has like controllers that you can attach to your wrist to do all sorts of like interactive things. Amazing. So this felt very similar to that, but then you put the headset on and that's your viewer, right? Versus being on like a little device, a console like the Switch, or on your computer or television, right? So I don't like the fact that you have to take it off sometimes. It's a big, big drawback for me. Plus, typing in passwords with these takes some getting used to. I've been getting faster every time I use it, but it's a little clumsy at first. I didn't like that. Maybe some of these accounts you could have set up on your computer or your phone before going in. That's a plus for me, is that there is an Oculus app. I use an iPhone, and so I downloaded on there, and the two sync together really easily. There's also an Oculus account for your computer, and that seems a little limited, but there's a lot going on with that, the computer version. I just found the iPhone works really well. In fact, one of the other cool things about it is you can do something called casting, which is display what you're viewing through the Oculus onto a device like your phone. That was really easy. It was a little slow, but that could have been my Wi-Fi. I also try to do it on my computer. You can go to oculus.com/casting to see a broadcast of what you're seeing through the Oculus, but that didn't work so well. I actually couldn't get that to work at all. They give you really simple steps. Has not worked for me yet. It could have been like my privacy settings, my browser, etc. Speaking of privacy, that's the other concern, especially because I did link my Facebook account to the Oculus. And that made me feel really vulnerable because unlike using an app or the computer, I didn't feel like the Oculus was as clear about how my data was being used and where my accounts were going to be displayed, if people can see my accounts. Like, definitely some privacy concerns came up for me, especially in some apps. Like, I wasn't even sure what information of mine was being shared and like what usernames I should use. That's something I really need to dig into more. But all of that aside, I think those are the main downsides to it. The plus side is that despite some of those obstacles, the Oculus felt really easy to use. What my friend did is wipe like a clean slate, I think, just backed it up. And just like any sort of device like an iPhone, you can delete everything on it and start fresh. So that was really kind of my friend. And I got to create an account on there and was just like in it really, really fast. And I don't know if everybody's learning curve will be as quick. I tend to be really tech advanced. So like, well, I shouldn't even say advanced because obviously I still struggle with some of the intermediate at least. So for me, it felt pretty easy and quick to use, but certainly getting used to these, the controllers, was a little confusing. Like I didn't know which buttons did what. One thing, I guess a slight downside that's really easy to figure out is which hand, like where the left and right is. It does say on the control, it says on like the little string, but it's not really obvious. Like at a quick glance, I just have to get used to how they place in my hands, right? So the triggers and all of that stuff. Also adjusting it on my face, while it fits really quickly and it doesn't have a lot of adjustments on it, that sounds kind of nice because it's simple. But the downside is I wasn't clear on how to get visual clarity with it, which was another big drawback. It wasn't very intuitive about how to adjust the piece on my face and how to adjust like inside. There's these little lenses, and they actually slide apart a little bit and slide inwards. And so I guess you can adjust it that way. But then like when you put it on, the only instructions they have is lift it up and down until you can see okay. That felt weird and not intuitive to me versus like a camera or a, not telescope, but what's that thing called where you put it up to your eyes to see something? For binoculars. Thank you. I said thank you as if somebody told me that. I'm thanking myself. Binoculars. You know, like usually there's a little dial at the top where you can adjust to get it more clear. This did not have anything like that, and I kept looking. And I also don't know why this part is coming off. My friend didn't share. I don't know if this broke or if it always kind of comes off like this. So that side of it, I guess, wasn't as intuitive, but it's like 85% intuitive, I would say. Charging is really easy. So you can just plug it in. There's a little port right here. I think it's USB-C. So yeah, it is for sure, because I could use the same for my Apple computer and my iPad. Those are USB-C. And then the controllers just have one AA battery each. And I heard a lot that it doesn't last very long, but I haven't had to replace them yet. I've been using rechargeable batteries in here, and they've been great. I've been using it a ton for the past 48 to 72 hours and have not had to replace those. The headset itself does die pretty quickly. I don't know exactly which model or version of the Quest 2 it is, but I know it's the higher end hard drive storage, which I've also heard people say that getting the 128 or the what's the higher end, 240? Whatever the levels are. I think the baseline now is 128 gigabytes, and then the higher one is 200 something. And that's what this is. But it might be an older version in terms of like the hardware. Anyways, yeah, the battery life isn't great. I've read online that you can get like little battery packs that kind of attach on the side. I think actually it's nice that the battery doesn't last super long because it gives you a reminder to pause. I would guess maybe the battery lasts a few hours at most, which goes by really fast depending on what you're doing and how often you're using it. For me, I've been kind of like going in for like 20 or 30 minutes, taking it off, going about my day, then coming back to it. And every time I do that, I try to charge it. So in general, the battery has been fine for me. But there was one time where I was using it consistently for maybe an hour to maybe 2 hours maximum, and it died pretty quickly for that reason. So that could be annoying, especially if you're really immersed in something. Like one thing that people are using Oculus and the metaverse for right now is conferences, meetings, and you know, you could be there all day. So if you had to keep charging over and over again, that could get really frustrating. I don't know if the hardware has different battery amounts, or if you just always have to get some sort of external configuration that I have not looked into yet. So let's talk about some of the things that I've done with it thus far. And this is where I'm going to get really lit up and excited. I just went in and started downloading things. I only downloaded apps that were free. One thing I didn't really know was that most of the apps, especially the really good ones like that you see advertised, you have to pay for. They range from, on the lower end, $10, averaging more around $20. And now that I've used it more, I could see why that would make sense. There are a good amount of free apps. A lot of them have paid subscriptions attached to them. So for example, I downloaded a few of the fitness apps. They were free as an app, but to actually use the classes, you have to pay, and they'll have like a 7 to 14 day trial. I'll talk about those in a little bit. So you had, you know, that was one of the examples where like you had to go to your computer and type in your credit card and confirm your account. And it was just like this whole ordeal. So that was fine. I guess like I'm used to that with other things, but like I was a little disappointed that there weren't more free things to do, especially because we're relatively new in this space. But if you think about it, similar to something like a Nintendo or an Xbox, where you'd probably be used to paying quite a lot of money. For example, the Mario games that I love on Nintendo, I think range from like $40 to $60. Like they're not cheap, but they're really fun. And once you get them, you can use them a ton. You'll come back. You're always going to own them. And what I think is neat about this, similar to what developed with the Switch, and I'm sure other consoles as well, is that you can download them virtually, meaning you're always going to have access to them, versus in the past with consoles, you'd get a cartridge which you could lose. Now, one downside to that that I could see is with the Switch, I actually always bought the cartridges. They're like little, they look like camera, what's the term? SD cards. I always bought those because then if I wanted to, I could sell them used, and somebody else could use them versus downloading the app. It's always attached to your account. You can't sell it. So does not seem to be any equivalent to a cartridge for the Oculus. So that's the downside, is like you can't sell any of these apps and look at them as the same way that you could with other games, as far as I'm aware. So there are games on the Oculus. There are a lot of experiences. There's entertainment. I guess if I were to put them into categories, so far that's what I've done. I've checked out a few kind of interactive experiences. I've done a bunch of workout classes. I've done a metaverse like there's a couple apps that were, one of them truly was the metaverse in terms of my experience. The other one I think still counts as that, meaning that it's interactive with other people. Actually, the more I think about it, there's a third one too. So let me get into the actual app, so I'm not just sharing the vagueness. And I don't really have an order in mind here. I have a list. They call them experiences, which, by the way, I wasn't sure if I should call them apps or not, but it seems like they're referred to as experiences instead of applications. So I was first and foremost wanted to get something fitness related. And I downloaded a few, and the ones that I've used thus far is HoloFit and Supernatural. I also dabbled in, let's see, where is this? Oh, Fit XR. I absolutely love Supernatural. And this one I think is one of the bigger apps in the Oculus space. They give you a 14-day free trial, and they have 3 different types of, quote, fitness or movement. And I put it in quotes because 2 of them are actual movement, and the third is meditation. So boxing plus something they call flow, which is like using these kind of like virtual sticks. No, they kind of look like lightsabers. Like they're all projected off of these, and I'll explain more in a second. And then the third is just sitting there meditating. And they have actual coaches. They're not live. I don't know if any of the apps have live training sessions on them. They must, but none that I've done yet. But they're these like, they almost remind me of holograms, very Star Wars like, where they kind of appear in front of you in this virtual world. And what's really cool about Supernatural, I think the name comes because they have you in a natural environment, versus the Fit XR that I tried out very briefly. Felt like I was in a gym or like a fitness studio. So it was indoors, versus Supernatural's amazing, especially if you love nature, because it's all in different parts of the world. So like one of the classes I took was in Egypt. One was like at the top of a mountain. One was by a lake. Like they have these amazing environments. They also, hi Jafar, thanks for being here. They have like music and soundscape, so like you feel like just fully immersed in it. And that's what's absolutely incredible about the Oculus experience, is the immersion. The only downside that I haven't figured out, I keep saying the only downside, I guess I have more downsides coming up than I realize, is there's a little bit of a gap here with, and I promise the dog barking in the background is okay. I'm not going to get into why the dog's barking if you can hear it well, but I apologize. I did everything possible to help this dog settle down, and it's a long story. So thank you in advance for being mindful. I'm waiting for someone to come help me take care of the dog right now. Anyways, so there's a little gap right here of light. So that's a little distracting, where sometimes I can see like underneath, like the light from the actual world coming in and taking me out of the immersive experience. But for the most part, the Oculus blocks 95% out, and you really feel like you're in the spaces. So in Supernatural, I felt like I was on top of a mountain, right? And I almost felt like the trainer looks real. The other downside, and I'm not sure if it's the settings or a Wi-Fi issue, I'm not quite sure, I need to research this more too, is that in Supernatural specifically, the graphics did not feel crystal clear. So I don't know if that's just like how the Oculus technology is right now, that it is almost real. And maybe that's a good thing, is it makes you feel like you're more doing a video game versus like actually there. It's somewhere in between, I suppose. But it was frustrating at times, especially when I was focused on like a person and like I could see all the like pixelated elements of them. And then when I went into the meditation experiences, I couldn't actually focus because it literally looked kind of out of focus and pixelated, where I was hoping it felt like I could really sense that I was there. You know, like it's like the version of like looking at a crystal clear photo from a really high-end camera versus like one you took with an older iPhone that like didn't have as good of a camera built into it. So it was surprising because overall Supernatural had great graphics. The sound was amazing. Speaking of sound, on the Oculus, it comes out of these little speakers on the side. They're almost over your ears. They're also kind of hard to adjust, but the position of them is like right above your ear. So here, let me put it on so you can see. It is positioned right above like the tip of your ear. So somehow though, the sound like is incredible. Like I was amazed. I saw some people were connected their headphones to it. I have a pair of Bluetooth headphones, so I'll look into seeing if that'll work, but I don't know how they're going to fit over my ear without this getting in the way. I have to look into that more. Maybe a pair of like earbuds would work, but I didn't see. Oh, there is a headphone jack on here. Oh, okay. Maybe I'll try that. Because another downside that's coming up in this moment is that you can hear the Oculus from the outside too. So when you're immersed in it, you kind of feel like you're the only one seeing and hearing it, which is true for the most part. But, you know, I was watching other people use the Oculus and I could hear everything going on. There's a little volume control down here. I like to have it all the way up because it's really not that loud, but it is loud when you're watching somebody else do it. So like that could be very distracting if you're trying to share the space with someone, or you're not casting it. Like they just kind of feel like the outsider hearing all the noise. So keep that in mind. You might want to attach headphones or find a quiet place to use it so that you're not annoying or distracting other people with it. And actually, I heard somebody talking about how they saw someone watching a movie on their Oculus on the airplane. So they must have had headphones for it. That's so funny. I didn't even notice that. A little headphone jack. Okay, so Supernatural, Fit XR, and the other one was HoloFit. Oh, here's what's cool about HoloFit is that you can use it with, I don't know if it's exclusively for the rower, but I have a rower, like a fitness rower, and HoloFit allows you to not connect it, but it indicate when you're using a piece of machinery, and the app will be able to adjust based on your movement. So I wasn't using the controllers at all. I was just using the headset. And the headset has cameras and sensors on it. So just by seeing my movements as I was rowing, it was able to create that interactive environment in the app. And HoloFit, I think is how you pronounce it, they had this simulated minecart experience. So it looked like, and HoloFit is part of the Oculus. It's called HoloFit. by Halodia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but you can look it up on the Oculus website if you want to check them out. And this minecart experience, every time I would row with the rowing machine, it was moving the minecart further, and I was going through like the mines, and it had like all of these like mine workers around, and there was some like gamification element of it that was pretty neat too. And then like the rest of it was actually inaccessible because you had to pay for it, so I didn't do that. I also dabbled in a few of the kind of more game-like, well, how do I say it, like animated game-like. One was called Maluka, which was really cool. I couldn't fully figure it out yet, so I stopped using it, but it's all kind of about your well-being. So it transports you to this very animated feeling island, and there's like this little spirit guide, I think. So they call it something like that like walks through and accompanies you through the island. And I barely scratched the surface of that. So that was pretty cool. I did the Jurassic World experience, and that was also really neat, especially if you're a fan of Jurassic Park franchise. They have 2 free experiences that are basically like immersive movies. So you can choose which one you do, and you put on the headset and you just sit there, and this whole story plays out for about 7 to 10 minutes. I forget the exact length around you, and you can look around like up, down, everywhere, and you can see and hear the whole experience. And that was really neat. Again, the graphics on that too weren't crystal clear, so it took me out of the experience a little bit. It probably would have been a little scary had they been like perfect graphics, but I really enjoyed that. Epic Roller Coasters was also interesting, but this is the first app that made me feel dizzy. So this is a roller coaster simulation, and that was one of the easiest apps to try out. I don't think I had to do a username or anything. You just start it up, and you're on a roller coaster, and this little guy comes up and like he's like a little flying like robot character, comes up and tells you what's about to happen. You can choose like which roller coaster you go on and a few settings, and then like you're on a roller coaster, and you're holding on to your controllers, which vibrate. And this is one thing that was amazing. I want to come back around to Supernatural in a moment to talk about the vibrating controllers, because they play a big role in that. So on the roller coaster, it kind of feels like you can feel the bump of like, you know, the tracks on a roller coaster. So it felt pretty immersive, of course, with audio as well. So you had 3 of your senses being stimulated, and that was the one app that I felt really dizzy and nauseous. I actually had to abruptly just take off the headset because I felt sick, and then like I felt nauseous for a little bit and had to lay down. But that was also my first day using the Oculus, and I definitely felt like it took some adjustment. Speaking of which, both the Epic Roller Coaster game and Supernatural, and maybe most of them, I have not figured out if there's a way to exit them, like quit the app. There is kind of a workaround that I found, but within the apps, I feel like it's strange that you can't just like click a button and it says, do you want to pause this? Instead, there's a button on the controller called the Oculus button down at the bottom. You can press that, and that takes you out, but it's kind of hard to explain. It doesn't feel as seamless. It feels, I don't know. I feel like there's got to be another way out of it. So Supernatural is really neat because they have workout routines, meaning like they have different segments of routines, and they're all based around music and coaching. And a lot of them have like 2+ songs and paced out. So it'll be somewhere around like 10 minutes to, I think they go over 30 minutes, and they have all these music tracks, and each one of them is a certain length, and you're in this whole fitness experience, either boxing or flowing. But I haven't figured out how to like skip to the next song. I don't know if there is a way to do that. So I always have to pause. And it's just a little bit confusing. And I don't know if that's just like a software app or or a user error. Like, I don't know how to use it. Now, going back to Supernatural, it to me is the highlight of the Oculus so far, because I have really struggled with working out recently. I subscribed to this amazing fitness trainer that I used to take in person before COVID. And I love this fitness trainer. I love the type of fitness, but I really struggle with motivating myself to take a virtual class. When I did the virtual class within the Oculus, it was like my brain was immediately into it. I didn't get bored. I didn't get tired. I didn't want to stop class early. I'm someone who really struggles to take an hour-long fitness class. I feel like I could easily do one within the Oculus. In fact, once I wrap this video up, I'm probably going to go take a class. So yesterday, I worked out so much and it went by in a flash. And I think the reason is, especially with Supernatural, it's so interactive, it's gamified, the coaches are amazing, your senses are stimulated, they have great music. It's like everything you could possibly want out of a great fitness class with the gamification element. So in there, the two different styles of boxing versus the flow, which feels like a weird word for it, given that you're basically using these you use your controllers, and in the game, the controllers look kind of like lightsabers, like these big long poles that you use to strike things. And Jafar just asked live, what's the fitness person's name? I took a variety of different, who do I take in person, or who do I take in Supernatural? Clarify and let me know. Because in Supernatural, they have all these different coaches and they haven't like picked a favorite yet. So anyways, the controllers act as like your hands, and then you can see the extension of them. Like when you're in the boxing, your hands look like boxing gloves. And when you're in the flow classes, they look like you're holding on to these like lightsaber, I don't know. I wish I knew what they were, but they're like poles. And you like use them to hit things. And so you're moving your arms around. Boxing is like all the classic boxing moves, even your stance, you're guided to different stances. You're hitting up and down, and the controllers are buzzing. You can go watch videos about Supernatural to get a visual for this, because they have like these targets flying to you, and you punch up depending on the move, and they guide you to tell you what type of boxing move to do. And you actually feel the controller vibrate when you hit your target. And then the flow classes with these lightsaber type poles that you use, you're hitting things with the poles as well, and they vibrate. And in those classes, they also have these virtual triangles that guide you to doing different moves with the rest of your body, like squats and lunges. Amazing. So I did probably 40 or so minutes. I didn't keep full track of it. But let's say 40 minutes of working out in the Oculus game, Supernatural specifically. I could barely walk today. I was so sore. I could not believe it. Now, first of all, that's probably because I've been taking a break from fitness for the past month or two. So I'm a little like out of shape in the moment, but I've been moving enough significantly. I guess I just haven't taken a full on fitness class in quite some time. And I could not believe how sore my legs are today. My arms are sore, my back and shoulders are sore, my lower back sore. Like almost all the major areas of my body are sore from taking about 40 minutes of these virtual classes. And Jafar says I'm an endurance athlete. You would love Supernatural because the classes are all designed for athletes too. Speaking of which, another app that I downloaded but haven't tried yet is called VZ Fit. And you can find all of these very easily by going to the Oculus website. I linked it in the description. You can type in Supernatural, VZ Fit. You can type in HoloFit, which again is HOLOFIT, and Fit XR. Now, Fit XR is cool because they have boxing, HIIT classes, and dance workouts. So far, I just did a quick short video of the boxing. I want to try the HIIT and dance workout, so maybe I'll try that today instead of supernatural. I also downloaded a demo for Dance Central that I want to try, and some meditation apps. And okay, now let's get into more of the metaverse before I wrap this up. So my very brief journeys into the metaverse-like experiences of the Oculus is through a few apps. One is called Half and Half, which is one of the trippiest apps I've ever done. If you have an Oculus, or when you get one, if you get one or borrow one or whatever, please try Half and Half. It is like nothing I can describe. It is so bizarre, but in like the coolest way. It's all animated, like all these little weird characters. You're in these worlds with real people. So you go in and suddenly all these strangers are around and you see them coming and going. So like some periods there's no one around. Other times like you see a bunch of these little characters, these avatars, and it shows like their username and they're walking around and kind of interacting with things, and you can go play games with them. So there's like a hide and seek game. There was a flying game I did. Like I didn't really know what I was doing. It wasn't super easy as a new user. Like there's a lot of like figuring out that you have to do. So I felt a bit intimidated and confused, but also deeply intrigued. And like just knowing that there are all these other people in there was really cool. I also downloaded Rec Room, which is one of the top experiences on Oculus for live interaction with other people. What I'm unsure about it is whether or not you invite people in or if you can just like go hang out with random strangers. I think you can do either, but Rec Room actually made me feel a little nauseous too. I think it's the movement. Like some of these apps, you're actually like walking through spaces, and in Rec Room, I was like walking through hallways. Didn't feel good, so I took it off, and I haven't tried it since. And hey, Peter, thanks for being here. Lots of live interaction today. Thank you. I appreciate you guys sharing your live commentary and questions. The other cool one that was like the deepest experience into interactive metaverse quite a life so far was Poker VR, where you can go and play poker games in real time with real people. And I went into a room and it says like when you open up this app, like, do you want to give access to your audio? I just said yes, not knowing what that meant. So be careful if you're worried about privacy or interacting with strangers. Maybe take your time, as I usually say in the Web3 world, and don't rush into it unless you're okay with taking some risks. Poker VR was the one place where I worried a little bit about my privacy, mainly because when I entered into the app, I just automatically used my username, which is Whit Lauritsen. And in hindsight, I wish I had picked like a random name, because since I was interacting with strangers, I got a little worried at some point, like, oh, they can see exactly who I am. Like I was doxing myself, you know? So I would be mindful, anything kind of metaverse like, to come up with a fake username that's not attached to your identity. Maybe I'm just paranoid in particular, but it seemed like everyone in Poker VR had some sort of like, alias. So the other thing with the mic on, I didn't realize it. I sat down at a poker table and like kind of said some things out loud, like, oh, are these real people? And my mic was on. So these people started responding to me in real time. And I'm like, is this computer generated a response? But I realized after a few minutes, those were real people playing poker. So of course you could do this online, but for some reason it was really jarring to me to do that in the Oculus because I wasn't expecting it. But after a little while, it was really cool because it felt like you're playing a real poker game. Like you're using these controllers to pick things up and, your chips and your cards. And like, it was like playing a real game. Amazing. All the sounds, there was background music. It kind of felt like you're in a casino. So the other thing I realized through looking through the store in the Oculus is there's an experience for anything you could possibly want to do. And this is where it starts to become really cool. One last thing before I do my summary of the Oculus is one of my favorite experiences on it thus far is actually like built into teaching you how to use it. But I didn't do it until after I fumbled my way through. So I think Oculus could do a better job of like leading you through the beginning stages. They have something called First Steps, and it's built into the Oculus. I don't think you have to download it. I think it was already there. And it is such a cool way to learn how to use it because it puts you into like a spacecraft or something where this like, it reminds me of Disneyland or Disney World. What do they call it? Like Tomorrowland or something, you know, like Space Mountain, let's say it there. Like you feel like you're there in you're hearing like this voice that comes on, like this really professional, welcome to First Steps type of voice. Female, robotic, but very kind voice. And she comes on and she says, and leads you through like, this is how you pick something up. And you get to actually practice using these controllers to pick up objects in there. So they have like blocks and they have like a punching bag and they had a paper airplane that you could throw and like a little flying what's it called? It was like a little airplane that you could control and it buzzed around in the air. And then you take a cartridge and put it into a console. Like it was like a old Nintendo game, like Super Nintendo, and you actually pick up the cartridge with these controllers and put it in the game console and press a button, and then it transports you into a game within the game. It was really fascinating. And it really reminded me of Ready Player One, especially the book. I've talked about in the past with the metaverse. I read the book Ready Player One. It's so good. It's so descriptive and detailed versus the movie is pretty good, but nowhere near as good. That experience in First Steps of Oculus made me feel like I was in the Ready Player One story. Like just something about that cartridge, which if you know the Ready Player One book, there's like this whole story about the main character. There's a plot line where the main character has to like play all these games in order to get to different points of the storyline. And so I have a feeling that First Steps was kind of based on Ready Player One, but maybe it was just coincidence. Then you go in and you actually get to dance around with like this alien robot type character. Literally, you take its hand and you're like dancing and you're encouraged to dance. And like, I felt my whole body come alive. I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. This is so fun. I felt like I was at an amusement park, you know, like I couldn't believe that all of this was happening in my home, you know? It was, and the way that the controllers buzzed, like you feel like you're in it. And anyway, so that was like a really fun thing. And I wish that was the first thing I had done with the Oculus before I tried to figure everything out on my own. And that leads me to why I think the Oculus and the metaverse are so exciting. This weekend, as I mentioned, has been heavy for a lot of us. You know, there's really intense things happening in the world, not to mention the pandemic and life in general. If you're watching the live stream, the sun just came in and like is blocking my my webcam, but it feels like perfect time. It's like shining a light onto this moment of me saying like, I think the metaverse and interactive experiences like you get with the Oculus are really helpful for our mental health in the sense that we can escape. And the Oculus experience of escaping into these worlds that were fun and interactive and stimulating was just an amazing way to uplift my spirits. Now, aside from games and entertainment, the fitness within the Oculus was so helpful for me, speaking of well-being, as somebody who struggles to work out. I have not gone to in-person classes since the pandemic, so that's thrown me off. I used to go to work out almost every single day, and I struggle with taking classes from my computer. I just feel like they're not the same. But working out in Supernatural was like, I mean, as I said, it was like taking a really good fitness class, but on top of it, adding in gamification, which for me motivated me. Like I loved the experience of punching things and hitting things with a lightsaber. Like and then they give you like a score at the end so you can beat yourself. It's kind of what I imagine the Peloton to be like. I haven't used a Peloton, but people love that because they want to beat their best scores, and you're in there with other people. Like all of those elements are there within this software, and to me, that's just amazing. And I can't wait to use it again. I have not felt this inspired to work out in months and months and months. And that's been hard for my mental health. Working out, moving our body is key. So while people might want to stay as connected to the real world as possible, and I completely relate and think that there are important benefits to that as well, the Oculus and these metaverse experiences that are evolving right now, I think can do wonders for us uplifting our spirits and motivating us and also connecting us, right? Like to go play poker, if you really love to play poker or a golf game or whatever else, like there's anything you could imagine in there. You can do it all in there with other people without actually having to leave your home. Right? And for some people, especially people like me, sometimes leaving your home is hard. Sometimes it's hard to get off your desk and leave work, right? If I can do a 20-minute session and get back to work right afterwards to meet a deadline, that's amazing. Versus in the past, I would spend 2.5, 3 hours just driving to class, getting there, working out, showering afterwards, driving home. It was a whole thing. I would often feel a lot of stress doing that. This is like a stress-free experience with all the benefits. And same thing with playing games with people. Like maybe you have social anxiety. I think for people that are introverted like me, people that have anxiety like me, believe it or not, I struggle a lot socially. And I think that the metaverse experience could be a really great way for me to be able to connect with others without feeling the same type of like physical stressors that I feel in person. Do I want it to replace all of that? No. But similar to Ready Player One, a big theme in that movie is that the world has kind of fallen apart and people use their metaverse in Ready Player One to take themselves out of the harsh realities. And given what's been happening right now in the Ukraine, I think a lot of people are looking for something like that. Does that mean we should turn our back on the real world? Absolutely not. Does that mean we should stop interacting in person and doing all these things like riding an actual roller coaster? Nothing's going to replace that, right? Nothing's going to replace hanging out with people in person and seeing their faces. So I think we need both. And I'm just really grateful that this technology exists. And I'm just borrowing my friend's Oculus right now. I'm certainly thinking already about buying my own. But I also kind of want to hold out for Apple's version, which I mentioned a little while back in an episode, but Apple's been developing their own VR headset. And I'm a big Apple fan, but people are expecting to be, right, last I checked, like $3,000, which is a lot of money, whereas the Oculus is only $299. And I kept thinking that this whole weekend, I'm like, $300 for all the stuff you can do in there. Even if you add the apps on top of it, you'd probably maybe spend $100, $200 an app. So $500 total, let's say, unless you count like subscriptions, but let's say $500 on average to really immerse yourself in here. Maybe $400 if you don't get a ton of apps. That's pretty incredible, given that workout classes alone can be super expensive over time. I used to pay, I think, $150 for my in-person workout membership. So in 2 to 3 months, that was the same equivalent to an Oculus, which is ongoing. So same thing, going to an amusement park. Some people can't afford to do that, but maybe they can see the long-term value of something like this, and they can have a lot of those fun experiences virtually, right? So that's the way I've been thinking about it. And I appreciate you listening or watching. Thank you for your patience as I've taken some time off. I hope that you're doing okay. If you have an Oculus, I would love to hear about your experiences. Send me a message. If you go to whitneylauritsen.com/web3, it's a really easy way to get in touch with me. And if you fill out the form or subscribe to the podcast on that page, you can give me your email address and I would love to send you some of my cryptocurrency coin, my social token called the Well coin on rally.io. That's actual currency, so you can sell it, you can hold on to it to get benefits. It's been doing pretty well over time. There's been some ups and downs in the cryptocurrency world that affects it. But that's a great way to get in touch because I would just love to hear from you. I want to hear your questions, your topics. I still have a backlog of other topics to get to. So if you've been waiting for me to answer a question, I promise it'll be coming soon. I just have a lot on my mind and a lot to cover. And I appreciate you listening and watching. And thank you so much for those that were here live. Peter and Jafar, I appreciate you. And wishing you all the best. Take really good care of yourself right now. And remember that it's an intense time. A lot of people are struggling. So be passionate, yes, always, but become passionate, be kind, be gentle with yourself and others. We all need it. And know that there's big things in the world. So if you can take a step back from the small stressors, if you can remember to slow down, pace yourself in life, and find joy in the little things like this, you're on the right track. And I'm always here for you from a well-being standpoint. So please never hesitate to email me, message me. I love, love, love hearing from you. And I'll be back with another episode very soon. Bye.